The questions again asked, where are we? What is this place that lies beyond Satchitananda? That place where the three levels of mind or existence merge seamlessly to bring about a state of alert presence and awareness. With the possibility of answering this question, we've been examining the levels of stories, which can be said to be parallel with the levels of life or existence. There's a story that at once is an allegory and contains in it all the elements that we can clearly define as the three levels of stories, as well as the secret, of course, contained in every story. Let's see if, when we experience that the elements of stories with their three clearly definable levels come together to be understood in this place that we arrive at after meditation, that we can come closer to answering the question, what is this place? Where are we when we abide in a state of alert presence and awareness? Where are we? The story is about a king who had a vast kingdom, rich, and he had an only daughter who he loved very dearly. But this daughter, from the earliest age, had an insatiable thirst for knowledge of a celestial kind, for the most part. She wanted to know how the stars were kept in the sky, why the sky was blue, and so forth. She indulged in all kinds of quests to satiate that thirst. But one day she came to hear that there was a great sage who knew the ways of the stars. And she told her father, who immediately sent a messenger to this sage, sending a golden carriage with a request that he come and teach his daughter, the princess, the way of the stars. Now when the great sage was brought back to the king, he was told, don't be afraid. The king will do you no harm. In fact, he will reward you handsomely. And the king promised the sage that he would build for him a great observatory if he would teach his daughter the ways of the cosmos. Now the old sage agreed to teach the daughter with one thing as a requirement, and that was that there was to be no one else present when he gave her the teachings. And so it was. The princess learned from the great sage all that he knew about the ways of the skies, the universe. And as soon as the old sage left, the princess put his knowledge into practice. And in that practice, she came to be able to read life. And so she was able to tell her father, the king, when there was an usurper. from another kingdom who wanted to invade and take over, and so soldiers were able to be sent, and this was not allowed. So the princess became a great advisor to the king. But in her studies of the celestial stars, she learned that there was a mountain that contained riches beyond measure, and that the only one who knew the entry into this mountain was none other than the great sage who had taught her the ways of the stars. So again she requested her father, the king, to have the great sage brought. And so he came, and this time the king promised him a telescope with which the stars could be brought 1,000,000 times closer than what he was able to perceive previously. So again the same rule applied. No one was to be present when he was giving this information to the princess. And on the very night on which the sage was imparting the knowledge, the princess said, "Let's go now." And so they did. The old sage said, "Come quickly, because we must arrive there before midnight." So the sage and the princess arrived at the great mountain, and the sage, standing in front of the mountain, uttered a few words, and with a great rumble the mountain opened, and they were able to enter. When they entered the inside of this great edifice, there was treasure such as the princess had never seen, far, far surpassing that of the palace of her father. There was treasure east, west, north, and south. But the old sage said to the princess, "Hasten, because we may remain here only for 1 hour, and we must leave, otherwise the mountain will close and we will be locked in forever." So the princess feasted herself on the treasures that she could see, and then the old sage led her out of the mountain, which with a rumble closed behind them. On their return to the palace, the old sage was given the telescope and left, but the princess could not wait to return to the place of those treasures, and so the very next night she went alone, and standing outside the mountain, she uttered the words that she had very carefully listened to as the sage had spoken, and with a great rumble the mountain opened once again, and she entered. There was the treasure, picking up this and that. There was so much to be seen, and the time passed, and she suddenly realized. But when she went back to make her exit, the mountain had closed, locking her in. She called and called, and those who were sent to seek for her heard her calling, but no one was able to assist her. to make an exit. Her father sent hordes of men with shovels and picks, but they could make no inroads into the mountain. But inside the mountain, the princess picked up a golden seashell. It was exquisitely made, and as she looked at the seashell, she thought, seashells, when you place them to your ear, you can hear the sea. So she placed the golden seashell to her ear and found that in ever which way she turned, she could hear conversations of what was going on at any level of existence. And she listened. She could hear her family bewailing the fact that they had not been able to save her. And then she tuned in to the great sages around, and she listened to learn, because still she had an insatiable thirst for knowledge. She found in the cave a stream that provided her with water, and a carob tree that allowed her food. But as it happened, in the kingdom there was a young, very, very poor man by the name of Yusuf. Now Yusuf, being poor from an early age, had to use his wits to scrounge, to help, to provide for his family, which was large. He was wily. And one day, when he was out seeking a means of finding provenance for his family, an old woman came into town shouting an oud for sale. Now an oud is like a lute. And when Yusuf saw this old woman and heard what she said, he had a longing to know how to play an instrument. But when he went to the old woman, he found that the oud had no strings. But he thought to himself that if he bought the oud, and surely when it had no strings he could buy it for a good price, that sometime he would be able to afford to get strings for the oud. So he went to the old woman and asked her price, and she said, "What can you pay?" But it so happened that Yusuf had 3 copper pennies, and offered these to the old woman, who readily accepted them in exchange for the oud. But then, as she was handing the oud over to Yusuf, she whispered to him, "This is a magic instrument, and if it is strung with golden strings, it will perform miracles." Now, as it happened, when the princess was entering the mountain, her golden cape caught on a bush. Unbeknownst to her, but back to Yusuf. Now Yusuf had heard the town criers, heard of the many people who'd gone to the mountain to try to save the princess, and he had a passing thought, maybe I could release the princess. So he went, and there around the mountain there were a great number of people who came in the daytime, thinking that maybe they could release her. But when they'd all left for the day, because Yusuf really had nowhere to go, he was about to settle down for the night, when suddenly, in the moonlight, the moon just having arisen, he noticed something glistening. And there he saw the golden thread. Now, he thought to himself, maybe I can string my oud. And so it was that the golden thread was just long enough to make the strings for the lute. So taking the lute, with his fingers played one of the strings, and surprisingly it released a word. So he plucked another word. He plucked another word. And together, these words were the secret sounds that the great sage had used, and with a great rumble, the mountain opened. Yusuf entered, and the princess was greatly relieved and embraced him. She had already heard through her golden shell that her father the king had promised her hand to whoever was able to release her, and she was greatly relieved and pleased to find Yusuf a handsome, personable being. Of course, there was great celebration, and because of the great gifts of the princess, and the wit and guile and wiles and experiences of Yusuf, they came to be the rulers of that kingdom, which prospered even more greatly than under that of her father, the king. An allegory of our spiritual path, and at the same time containing very clearly for us the 3 levels and the 4th, which goes unsaid, the secret. So in this state where the 3 levels of mind have merged in a state that we know can be arrived at by meditation, contemplation, concentration, not needing intellectual analysis, but coming from that place that we're endeavoring to express. First of all, in the way of stories, what for you is that level that has that lesson or moral or teaching. What's the teaching of this story, first of all? What does it bespeak of? Clearly, we've experienced it in our own spiritual quest. But what is it that this story brings and expresses as a lesson, a moral, a teaching that we ourselves have experienced? What was it about our life, in our endeavors to arrive at this place? What is it that's needed, that's expressed in this story? The quest, the intrepidness, the hunger, the thirst, the longing. And what about the second level of stories, the symbols and archetypes? Which ones do you recognize in this story?
Like in the princess, there's a spirit being released. The mind in control of a higher force.
Yes. And what's the unifying thread or motif of this story, that third level of stories?
Secret words.
Pardon?
Secret words.
Okay, the secret words. So if we can recognize that these levels of stories come together also seamlessly as a story, as the stories that we ourselves tell or can tell or will tell, that these three levels of life and mind also come together seamlessly, even though they can be clearly defined as the nitty-gritty level of cause and effect, the spirit level of the occult, and that level of undifferentiated energy or subjectivity where everything is interrelated. So the question again is, where are we? What is this place that is a state, we know, of alert presence and awareness that combines effortlessly these three levels of existence, even though we can perceive them and recognize them very clearly They're definable as the level of cause and effect, the level of the magic, dreams, intuition, creativity. That level of oneness. Together, seamlessly in our state of alert presence and awareness. What name?
Life.
Life, yes. But for us, mostly life is that movement, and life is others 3 levels of mind that we would define. Isn't that so?
Yes. Light.
Light, okay. Light. And what does light mean in terms of?
Well, as in God's light.
Okay.
You're in the light.
Mhm.
You're in God's hands, in God's care.
Okay.
too.
And all things, when they're taken up into light, of course, disappear as separate entities, yes.
Space that will all exist.
All right.
And now,
The now, we know. Yes. So if we can name it, then we can express it. Could you perceive that as being our task? How do we reveal the secret? How do we reveal the secret in our everyday life?
By being, Mary.
Being.
By being.
Yes, okay. Yes, we can define it as that. By being. But for us that includes non-being as well. It includes the stillness and the movement. So we have these beautiful words like isness and beingness and nowness, or being in the now. But in today's world, they conjure for others a definition that's been heard of, whether it be in the realms of New Age or even the mystical writings they contained. So there's always connotations related to it, to them, aren't they? So we have a challenge. We have a challenge to express the inexpressible in a way that is not going to be misconstrued by virtue of the definitions that have been given to the words that relate to spirituality. It's a hard task, isn't it?
Is it possible?
It's possible.
It is.
Absolutely possible. So let's see where it takes us.